Mr. Scheer, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Canadian Infrastructure Bank was supposed to get private sector funds to build public infrastructure. Last week, this government announced through the CIP that it was giving $655 million of taxpayers' money to a company owned by Fortis Inc., a multi-billion-dollar company, to build a project that was already getting built anyway. Will the minister, simple question here, will the minister provide this committee with the details of the special deal they cut to Fortis Inc.?
Minister McKenna.
Apologies if you hear my dog. My dog's like coming in and barking. Look, the Canada Infrastructure Bank is complementary to the Government of Canada's historic $180 billion investing in Canada Infrastructure Bank plan. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is independent. I will say that's a very good project that will lower emissions, that will also create good jobs for Canadians and create economic opportunity. And to others who might think that, we want to privatize infrastructure assets or sell assets, not the goal of the infrastructure bank. It's really to make sure that we bring that good projects go ahead, and that's really an opportunity that the bank is doing. They're investing in many different projects.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Go ahead, Mr. Scheer.
If it's such a good project, why couldn't Fortis Inc. pay for it itself? This is a company that made over $8.9 billion in revenue last year. They paid out over $800 million to their shareholders. And yet this government decided to cut a check of $655 million for a project that was already getting built anyway. The Lake Erie project has been proposed since 2014. So very simple question. Will the government provide this committee with the details of the special deal they just gave to Fortis Inc.?
Minister?
Well, I think the member opposite might know the Ontario Minister, Greg Rickford. I'll just read what he said. The Lake Erie Connector demonstrates the advantage of public-private partnerships to develop critical infrastructure that delivers great value to Ontarians. Connecting Ontario's electricity grid to the PJM electricity market will bring significant tangible benefits to our province. This new connection will create high-quality jobs, improve system flexibility, and allow Ontario to export more excess electricity to promote cost savings for Ontario's electricity consumers.
Will you table the details of the deal? Yes or no?
I'm happy. As you know, we have the CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. He's come to present before, and we're always able to provide information about any project.
This isn't about whether or not it's a good project. It's about who should pay for it. ITC Holdings is owned by Fortis Inc. Fortis Inc. made almost $9 billion in revenue last year. They paid over $800 million to shareholders in dividends. If this was such a good project, those shareholders, those investors could pay for it themselves. We are dealing in the aftermath and a current pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people have lost everything. They've been told they can't open their doors. They've watched their entire life savings disappear. Their businesses are on the verge of bankruptcy. And this government decided to give $655 million to a multi-billion-dollar organization, a multi-billion-dollar operation, private sector company that pays out over $800 million to their shareholders in dividends. Why?
Okay, let's just be clear that our government has supported Canadians through this pandemic, and we're going to continue to support Canadians. 80 cents out of every dollar is going to support Canadians. But let's also be clear of what the minister from Ontario, who happens to be a conservative, said, that this is going to mean jobs for Ontarians. This is going to be lower prices for consumers. This is going to be something that is good to tackle climate change. And you talked about this project. I'm not going to second guess the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It's independent, and I'm sure they can provide you the justifications. But this project, there's no evidence this project was going to go ahead, and it crowded in private sector investments. We need good projects to go ahead. I know that the member opposite does not believe in the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which is very surprising for someone that's a conservative.
It's a failure.
Believe that we should get more. Do you believe we should get more infrastructure built? Do you believe that we should crowd in the private sector to do that? Do you believe that the federal government does not have enough, can't fund every single dollar of infrastructure investment that we need to build the future we want?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Go ahead, Mr. Scheer.
isn't it the case that this minister and the CEO of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank was so embarrassed about not being able to prove a single dollar worth of private sector investment that they went running out and found a project that was already getting built? ITC Holdings brags on its website that all that is needed is a few servicing agreements in the US to get this project built. This is a multi-billion-dollar organization. Canadians are losing everything they've ever worked hard for.
Scheer.
And this government decided to give $655 million in corporate welfare. It's disgusting.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Mr. McKenna, short answer.
That's all wrong. And I would just
what have I said that's not
that
true?
Mr. Scheer.
Everything that you said is not
You didn't
true.
give him $655
Our
million?
focus has always been on getting more infrastructure built by crowding in the private sector, which is good for Canadians. And once again, I would just go back to the Minister of Energy for Ontario, who talked about the importance of this public-private partnership to get critical infrastructure built that brings greater value to Ontarians. That's jobs at a time that we need jobs. That's climate action at a time when we need climate action. That's lower costs to consumers at a time where I'm sure consumers appreciate lower costs. I'm not embarrassed by that. I think that is good.
Can you mute yourself, please? Minister, continue. You got to give me about 5-10 seconds.
Look, I think that the Canada Infrastructure Bank has a really important role to get more infrastructure built. There's a limit to the dollars that the government has, that there is private sector that has money to invest in infrastructure that is good for Canadians. We're going to continue to do that by working with the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you, Minister.